Chapter 781 The Brightest Light. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Sunny shuddered, thinking that he was caught on fire. But then froze. Somehow, it did not seem like the white radiance was harming him at all. It just enveloped his body, making his skin shine with a suffused glow. However, it was also not healing him. Instead, Sunny stared at Nephice with astonishment and asked in a low voice. What is happening? From the confused look on her face, she did not do whatever it was that had happened on purpose. Changing Star took an involuntary step back, removing her cool palm from his cheek, and briefly glanced at her hand. The white glow was gone from it. I don't know. Sunny opened his eyes wide and looked down on his shining body. Very strangely, he felt empowered. In fact, his condition was very similar to how he felt when one of his shadows was wrapped around him. His physical prowess seemed to have doubled. There were small differences, of course. The augmentation of Neph's flame seemed to be more furious and active, centered around strength and resilience. It also filled him with a soft, pleasant feeling of warmth. What was more, it did not only affect his body. It reached into his soul, as well, igniting and enhancing it. The shadow essence flowing through his body became much more potent and vibrant, full of greater energy. Sunny blinked. Did Nephice just augment him with her aspect ability? Since when can you augment other people? Changing Star seemed to be as bewildered as he was, even though it did not show on her face. I can't. This was not supposed to happen. My dormant ability only evolved to include soul augmentation when I ascended, it never evolved to be able to spread to other people. Sunny opened his mouth, then closed it again. Eventually, he hissed. Then how do you explain this? I'm glowing. He waved his hand in the air, causing the shadows of the underground dojo to move and shift. Then, a bizarre thought entered his mind. Wait. Following his suspicion, Sunny lingered for a moment, and then commanded the gloomy shadow to wrap itself around Nephice. The shadow did not even roll its eyes as it usually did when receiving an order. It eagerly slid forward and swiftly wrapped itself around the lithe, slender body of Changing Star. Neph flinched. Ha! She studied her arms with wide eyes. Her ivory skin had turned gray, as if covered by dark film. Then, she made her hands into fists and frowned. I feel stronger. The two of them remained silent for a few moments, processing the implications of this unexpected discovery. Usually, Sunny felt a lot of negative emotions every time he thought about the innate ability of his aspect, Shadow Bond, which tied him to Changing Star's will. On this occasion, however, his curiosity and greed for power briefly overpowered his resentment. If Shadow Bond allowed Nephice and him to augment each other to this degree, what else would they be capable of? Neph seemed to come to the same conclusion. They glanced at each other, understanding the other's thoughts without having to say anything. Sunny hesitated for a moment, then said. It causes you pain to use your ability. We can stop now. She slowly shook her head. No yet. With that, Sunny simply nodded and commanded the gloomy shadow to return and wrap itself around his body. At the same time, he ordered the other three to do the same. Changing Star, meanwhile, concentrated for a moment, causing the white radiance suffusing his skin to grow many times more intense. Sunny let out an audible gasp. For shadows made him 5 times more powerful. That he already knew. Flames summoned by Nephice, who was a tyrant, were more or less akin to 5 additional shadows. In theory, his physical prowess should have grown tenfold as the result. What a stupendous augmentation! Combined with his might as a master, his 4 cores, and the subtle but consequential physical enhancement he received from Blood Weave, Sunny should have become monstrously strong. But in reality, the effect was even great. The shadows and the brilliant light seemed to resonate with each other, making the sum greater than its parts. Sunny turned into a silhouette shrouded in broiling darkness. That darkness, however, was permeated with blinding white light. The light made the darkness deeper, while the darkness made the light much more stark and radiant. He looked like an abyssal spirit of the starlit void. He felt powerful. Immensely powerful. Powerful enough to face a saint in a fight. He looked at the training sword grasped in his hand, and easily made the reinforced alloy shatter in his grip. He did not even have to exert a lot of his strength. Deeply stunned, Sunny whispered. Scary. A few moments later, Nephi sighed and recalled her flames. Sunny allowed his shadow to slid back to the floor. Changing Star looked at him and asked, her voice unsure. How did it feel? Sunny remained silent for a while. Eventually, he forced out a pale smile and said. Like a dream, they stayed in the dojo for the entire night, experimenting with the strange and frighteningly powerful application of their unnatural bond. There were many things they had to explore, even though it was too dangerous to test the limits of this new power here. The last thing Sunny wanted was to completely wreck the foundation of his home. It wouldn't have been fun if the whole building suddenly collapsed. Still, there were a lot of things that they have discovered. First, both Sunny and Nephi's could be enhanced by the white flames and the shadows. All of this might could be concentrated on one person, or shared between them in any proportion they chose. Mixing any light into the shadows or even one shadow into the radiant light made the end result more powerful. Secondly, the same could be done to their memories. Pouring all of their power into the cruel sight, for example, made it somewhere around 15 times deadlier. This scale of enhancement went well beyond the confines of its rank, making the somber spear as powerful as a transcendent weapon. Applied to an armor, the augmentation was just as strong. However, doing so would have been a bit wasteful. Memories had no souls, and as such, the part of Changing Star's flames that made a person's soul more active and resilient was wasted on them. It did, however, affect shadows and echoes. Sunny and Nephi's tested the full augmentation of their combined aspects on Saint first, and then on the echo of a 6-armed ascended demon that Changing Star possessed. The result was as frightening as what Sunny had experienced himself. As the dawn painted the world in shades of pale violet and lilac, the pair was still cooped up in the underground dojo. Although neither spoke, their eyes were full of thought. Both understood what their discovery meant. Each of them bore a divine aspect. Each was immensely powerful when compared to other ascended. When two bearers of divine aspects combined their power, however, Ednel.co imagining what they could do was indeed a bit scary. After a while, Sunny glanced at his communicator and flinched. Crap. It's morning already. I am going to be late for my lecture. He looked at Nephi's, suddenly realizing how tired and spent she looked. Using her ability so much must not have been easy. She simply nodded. You can go if you wish. I'll rest for a while. Sunny hesitated for a moment, then nodded and used Shadow Step to jump to his closet on the second floor of the house. A few minutes later, he was already running out of the door, wearing civilian clothes that Kai had helped him pick a while ago. Changing Star was left alone. Chapter 782 Grand Teacher. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. On the way back from school, Rain couldn't think about anything else except for the news that she had heard from her classmates. At first, she had dismissed them as a wild rumor, but then her inquisitive nature forced her to check the respectable government portals to make sure. A minute of research revealed that the rumors were true. Changing Star of the Immortal Flame Clan, the lost hero of the Forgotten Shore, had ascended and returned to the real world. She was alive. Can't be. By now, the news were spreading across the network like wildfire. Rain could tell that many of the passengers riding the train with her were thinking and talking about the same thing. Everyone looked shocked and excited. She did not pay other people any attention, however. There was only one thought on her mind. She had to tell Sunny. Her friend and mentor was a member of Changing Stars cohort, after all. More than that, from the hints she had received from Effie and a short conversation she had had with Sunny, Rain knew that there was much more between the two than simple camaraderie. He had basically admitted as much. Sunny will be so happy. Despite the fact that she was not supposed to have the next lesson with her young tutor for a few days, Rain decided to bring him the news personally. And right away. She simply couldn't wait. Of course, in all her excitement, she had failed to account for the fact that if the news were indeed true, Sunny would have been one of the first people to learn of it. Full of anticipation, Rain rushed from the tram station to her mentor's house, opened the door, and walked inside. Throwing her backpack into the corner by habit, she took off her shoes and shouted. "Sunny! Sunny! Are you home? You won't believe." Then, however, the teenage girl froze with her mouth wide open. As she watched in stunned silence, the curtain hanging over the entrance to the guest bedroom parted, and a tall, incredibly beautiful young woman walked into the living room. Suddenly, it seemed as if sunlight pouring through the windows became a little bit brighter. The young woman was slender and graceful, with flawless ivory skin and striking gray eyes. Her face was calm, aloof, and strangely mesmerizing. What shocked Rain much more, however, was that the beautiful stranger's skin glistened with moisture, as if she had just left the shower. She was wearing nothing but one of Sunny's black shirts, leaving her long legs mostly bare. And her wet hair, was of a strange silver-white color. The silver-haired young woman walked toward the kitchen, then stopped and looked at Rain. A hint of confusion appeared on her face. She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Hey." Rain raised a trembling hand and pointed a finger at the stranger's head. Her teeth chattered as she forced out, You're. The beautiful stranger raised an eyebrow and remained silent. Rain finally managed to finish her sentence. "You're Changing Star." The last daughter of the Immortal Flame clan tilted her head a little, then shrugged. "Yes, I am." "Who are you?" Rain swallowed, slowly realizing that she was in the presence of one of the most talented battle commanders and heroes of humanity, a person so renowned that there was hardly anyone in the entire world who did not know her name, and Sunny's. Remembering the lessons he had taught her, the teenage girl forced herself to calm down, somewhat, and said weakly. I am Rain. Sunny is my teacher." Changing Star remained silent for a moment, studying the unexpected guest. Then, a small hint of a smile appeared on her beautiful face. "Really? Well. I used to be your teacher's teacher. I guess that makes me your grand teacher." Rain opened her eyes wide. Wah! Changing Star of the Immortal Flame clan, was her what? The concept simply failed to register. The supposed grand teacher, meanwhile, walked over to the kitchen counter and poured herself some water. She drank it, then looked at Rain. After a few seconds of silence, she said. "I'll be staying here for a few days. You can call me Neff." Rain slowly nodded, not quite sure what she was just told. Was she sleeping? Was the famous lady of the Immortal Flame clan in front of her, wearing Sunny's shirt, telling Rain to call her by her fist name? A nickname, even. If that bastard Sunny had not subjected Rain to stumbling into Song of the Fallen, Raised by Wolves, and Nightingale, she would have probably fainted by now. As it was, Rain was barely able to remain on her feet. Lady Changing Star. Neff looked at her attentively, and then suddenly asked a strange question. "Rain, does your home have a big window and a lawn?" Rain silently nodded. "Yes." "Why?" Neff lingered for a moment, and then turned away. "Just wondering." Then, she looked toward the living room area and sipped her water. "Oh. By the way, do you know how to control the entertainment system of this house?" Rain nodded again. Yes, I do. Changing Star smiled with satisfaction. Great. I was told that there is a movie about me. Can you put it on the projector? Rain made a deep breath, obediently walked over to the projected, connected it to her communicator, and searched for the Song of Light in Darkness on the network. A few minutes later, she found herself sitting on the sofa next to Master Changing Star, the legendary heiress of Immortal Flame, as the somber music reverberated all around them. The movie was starting. Am I dreaming? This can't be real, can it? On the wall in front of them, the interior of a spacious and brightly lit room appeared. A handsome man with dark circled under his eyes was studying a map, while a little girl with silver hair was playing on a carpet near him. The man was speaking. We, awakened, only raise arms to protect humanity. Sitting next to Rain, Nephi sighed and palmed her face. Chapter 783 Captive Audience. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Projected onto the wall, a languid jade beauty with a slim waist and long eyelashes was traversing a labyrinth of crimson coral, her voluptuous figure barely covered by a flimsy seaweed attire. A teenage boy of about 13 years of age was scurrying along as he shouted. Are you crazy? Sitting on the sofa near the real Changing Star, Rain felt like sinking into the earth. As the movie went by, her cheeks slowly turned bright red. The daughter of the Immortal Flame clan, on the contrary, became increasingly more deadpan and devoid of emotion. By now, her face was so still that it seemed paralyzed. Rain awkwardly cleared her throat. Come to think of it, the actress they chose does not look like you at all. You are much prettier. Nephi shifted and briefly glanced down. Then, she said evenly. Thank you. After a while, she added. Why would they cast a child to play Sunny? What a strange decision. Only a complete fool could mistake him for a young boy. Rain let out a nervous laugh. Yeah, definitely. She looked away in utter embarrassment, and then forced out. And what is up with that stupid catchphrase? That does not sound like something Sunny would say at all. Changing Star moved, suddenly becoming a little more lively. Oh, no. That actually happened. A lot. The movie, meanwhile, continued. The three sleepers braved the wilderness of the Forgotten Shore and eventually reached the Dark City. The brief moment of liveliness passed, and instead, Changing Star seemed to grow more rigid and cold with each scene. Rain felt so uncomfortable that she could not bring herself to say anything. What kind of idiot directed that stupid movie? Meanwhile, a handsome young man with broad shoulders and a noble bearing appeared on the screen. Rain glanced at Lady Nephi curiously, wondering how much of what was shown about her relationship with the heroic Han Lecaster was true. And how her apparent relationship with Sunny fit into it. Could it be that there had been an actual love triangle between them? Sadly, she failed to glimpse anything from Changing Star's stoic face. The movie progressed, slowly reaching its culmination. On the wall, the masculine face of the actor playing Sir Castor radiated courage and passion. Holding the grief-stricken jade beauty by the hand, he looked her in the eyes and said with passion. Should I fall, do not cry for me, my lady. My life does not matter, but yours does. Immortal Flame must never be extinguished. As long as it burns, humanity still has hope. The dreamers of the Dark City have hope. As long as you live, I can face 1,000 deaths with a triumphant smile. Rain shifted uncomfortably. Is it me, or is it getting hot in here? Not a single muscle moved on Changing Star's face. She looked at the projection with a deadpan expression. The projection, however, suddenly stuttered. Rain frowned. Ha! In the next moment, she thought that she smelled smoke. Turning around, the teenage girl noticed a thin stream of it rising from inside Sunny's expensive projector. That's strange. Rain opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, the projector suddenly exploded. After the movie was suddenly and violently interrupted, Rain only stayed for long enough to help Changing Star clean up the debris of the malfunctioned projector. Then, she found an excuse, grabbed her backpack, and hurriedly left. Who knew what was going to explode next? Once the teenage girl was gone, Nephice was once again left alone in the empty house. She lingered for a bit, then went back into the guest bedroom and rummaged through Effie's closet. She had no clothes apart from the tracksuit that the academy had issued to her, which was soaked with sweat after the night she had spent with Sunny Underground. There were memories, of course, but she had worn armor for the better part of the last 3 years. Putting on something mundane was strangely comforting. Leaving Sunny's shirt on, she found a pair of gym shorts to match it. Sadly, other articles of Effie's clothing did not fit her too well. She was going to have to do some shopping soon. Considering such matters again felt very strange. Eventually, Nephice found herself back in the living room with nothing to do. She simply sat in silence for a while, trying to deal with the disturbing oddity of not being in danger. Then, she shifted uncomfortably, looked around, and took out the state.of.the.art communicator the government provided to her. She stared at it for some time, then tentatively accessed the network. After a while, Neff found herself senselessly scrolling through popular clips. A few minutes later, one video caught her attention. A demonic figure in black armor and fearsome mask stood in a small clearing in the middle of a thick forest, a long blade of an odachi resting on his shoulder. The swordsman's white hair moved slightly in the wind. Something about him seemed odd. Suddenly, 12 figures appeared from behind the trees, surrounding the demonic swordsman. One of the ambushers spoke. "Sorry, mongrel, no hard feeling, right?" Nephice shook her head slightly and sighed. 12 against 1. The man in black armor, meanwhile, remained silent for a moment and then said calmly. "None whatsoever." Already knowing how the fight would end, Neff moved her finger to scroll on, but then stopped. Something very unexpected was happening on the screen of her communicator. Instead of being instantly overwhelmed, the warrior dodged several attacks and dove through a stream of scorching fire, his black armor reflecting the crimson flames like the scales of an infernal monster. His gauntlet collided against the head of one of the enemies, instantly breaking the skull. White sparks slowly ignited in the depths of Neff's eyes. Interesting. She lingered, watching the brutal slaughter with a hint of excitement. After spending years fighting against overwhelming odds, Nephice couldn't help but root for the lonesome swordsman. A few seconds later, she was fully engrossed in the video. Remarkable. Chapter 784 Single Hole. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The second lecture had turned out to be a challenge for Sunny. Not because he felt unprepared to teach the less experienced awakened, but because all of them were very enthused and full of questions about Changing Star's return. The whole academy was abuzz. "Master Sunless, have you met Lady Changing Star? Is it true? Did she ascend? Are you going to join the Immortal Flame clan now? Can we join, too?" Normally, that would not have been a problem. Sadly for Sunny, he could not refuse to answer any question due to his flaw, so it took some time and ingenuity to not let anything important slip while reining the students in. Eventually, he forced them to concentrate on the lecture. After the lecture was over, he had to take care of some administrative issues, as well as visit teacher Julius and assist the old man with a few tasks. Seeing that his assistant was very eager to leave, the elderly instructor did not keep Sunny long and soon let him go with a knowing smile. "Ah, youth." Sunny frowned a little as he hurried to the door. What is that supposed to mean? Throwing the confusion out of his mind, Sunny decided to not waste time and used Shadow Step to reach the train station as fast as possible. On the way home, he was deep in thought. After the night of experimenting and exploring their bond, he was very curious what else Nephice and him could do. As far as Sunny understood it, Shadow Bond made it so that their souls were strangely considered to be two parts of a single whole, at least when applied to the function of their aspects. So, did that mean that he could pull Neff with him through the shadows when using Shadow Step? If he used a charm like Blood Blossom, would its effect be shared to her? If so, would the boost granted to them remain the same, or grow twice as weak? He had many questions like that, and answers to them could only be found through further experimentation. Sunny was very excited. Why wouldn't he? He was always resentful of his weakness and of the fact that stronger awakened or powerful nightmare creatures could snuff out his life without too much trouble. Anything that could grant him more power to defend himself was a boon, and the memory of how powerful he had felt last night was still fresh in his mind. Of course, reality was not so simple. Firstly, any experiment would demand Neff to go through torturous pain. Secondly, he had not forgotten that this power came at a cost. The cost was his freedom. Nephi seemed to be reluctant to use the shadow bond to compel him to do her bidding, but he could not be completely sure of her intentions. Not until they talked openly about it. It was just that, he didn't want to have that talk yet. Talking openly about anything was the last thing he usually wanted to do. Later. I'll do it later. Neff was barely out of the nightmare. Sunny himself had not been in the best of shapes after ascending, for a while. It was better to give her some time to balance herself. Soon, he was nearing his house. The security system automatically scanned his biometrics and unlocked the door. Opening it, Sunny walked inside and took off his shoes. Then, he looked around and noticed Neff sitting on a tall stool near the kitchen counter, staring at her communicator with strange intensity. Her eyes were burning, and it seemed as if she had spent a lot of time without moving. She seemed to be so engrossed with what was happening on the screen that she did not even pay attention to his return. Clenching her fist, Neff suddenly spoke. "Come on. You can do it. She is good, but you are better." He blinked a couple of times, unaccustomed to hearing such enthusiasm in Changing Star's voice. She was usually far more reserved. And what did she mean? What was he supposed to do? Who was he better than? Ah, she must be talking to herself. But what the hell is she watching? Sunny took a few steps forward and looked over Neff's shoulder. A strange expression appeared on his face. On the screen, a ferocious swordsman in black armor was fighting against a graceful woman who wore a light metal armor and an elegant half-dot mask. Rose petals fell from above, carpeting a grandiose arena. A dark odachi and a slender estoc clashed against each other, filling the air with the clangor of steel. Wait. Isn't that my duel against Queen Bee? That was a memorable fight. He had barely won that one. Sunny blinked a couple of times, remained silent for a few moments, and then coughed. Hey. I'm back. Nephi's froze. She paused the video, hesitated, then slowly turned and looked at him with a startled expression. Oh, hey. Sunny stared at her for a couple of seconds, then asked with a little smile. What are you watching? Nephi suddenly livened up and gestured at her communicator. That. I stumbled on a video of a very interesting fighter. Have you heard about that guy, Mongrel? He's incredible. I've been watching, studying his fights for a few hours. Sunny scratched the back of his head, and then said evenly. Mongrel. Yeah, I've heard a few things about him. Incredible, you say? Do tell what is so incredibly about him, in detail. Then, he suddenly frowned and sniffed the air. What's this smell? Crap, don't tell that the filtration system is glitching. Sunny looked around, and then froze. His eye twitched. What happened to my projector? A familiar deadpan expression appeared on Neff's face. She glanced in the direction where the expensive model of the projector had used to be, lingered for a moment, and shrugged nonchalantly. Oh. A malfunction, I guess. How strange. Chapter 785 Solitude. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As Sunny bitterly explored the damage done to his entertainment system by the strange malfunction, Nephi silently watched him from her stool. Doesn't make sense, gone, the projector is completely gone. It was so expensive. After a while, he turned to Changing Star with a miserable expression and opened his mouth, then frowned in confusion. Wait, is that my shirt? Neff shifted a little and then said, her voice even. I don't have any clothes. Sunny stared at her for a few moments, then waved a hand and looked away, forgetting what he was going to say. Never mind. You can keep it. We can also order a delivery of anything else you need. I am an incredibly rich entrepreneur, you know. He paused, then added with a bit of embarrassment. Well, I used to be rich, anyway. These days, I pretty much spend everything on research. She tilted her head a little, then suddenly said. The girl you're tutoring visited. What? Pretending to be nonchalant, Sunny glanced at Nephi and answered in a neutral tone. Oh. Strange. We weren't supposed to have any lessons until a few days from now. Neff remained silent for a few moments, then looked away with a smile. She is a bright kid. I'm glad you are teaching her. He studied her expression with a frown. What up with that smile? Finally, Sunny shrugged. Well, money is money. My lessons aren't cheap. After that, he sighed, threw the destroyed projector out of his mind, and walked into the kitchen. Are you hungry? I can cook something up. My culinary skills have improved a lot, you know. As you should have already noticed. It was a strange thing. Back on the forgotten shore, Nephi had always been the one in charge of feeding the cohort. Now, their roles seemed to have reversed, in more ways than one. She deactivated her communicator and said neutrally. I could eat. Thank you. Then, Changing Star frowned slightly and added. Oh, but I don't have a lot of time. There is a consultation with the government psychiatrist I need to attend shortly. By remote, of course. Sunny stared at her for a while, then shook his head. This is so weird. Deciding to prepare something that did not demand a lot of time to make, he took out a pack of ramen, some vegetables, a piece of natural meat, and a pair of eggs. I never thought that I would hear something like that from you, of all people. A psychiatrist, really. He started the process of cooking ramen, and added. Was it really that bad? Changing Star sighed and looked down. After a while, she suddenly said. No. It wasn't too bad. Her voice sounded distant, and a bit strange. In fact, out there in the dream realm, I felt. Nephi inhaled deeply, and then looked at him somberly. Happy. Sunny almost dropped the cooking pot. Of all the answers out there, he had not expected to hear that one. Looking at Nephi with an incredulous expression, he asked. What? Did you say happy? She sighed, and nodded. I know that it sounds strange. And yes, traveling through that hell alone was excruciating, terrible, and hard. Many times, I did not think that I would survive. Other times, I wanted to die. There was so much pain, so much hunger, so much thirst. So much cold, so much unbearable heat. So much silence. A wistful expression slowly settled on her face. But it was also so simple. So liberating. All I had to do was walk, fight, kill. Survive. There was no space for unnecessary thoughts. No burdens I had to carry. No complicated feelings, no responsibility. I did not have to remember where I came from, and where I was headed. I did not have to a part of anything. It was just me against the nightmare creatures. And the dream realm itself. He listened silently, trying to imagine what living like that would feel like. Well, he didn't have to try too hard. Had he not experienced something similar while living alone in the ruined cathedral of the Dark City? Yes, he had not been entirely himself back then, but he was also the happiest he had ever been, perhaps. There was a bliss in giving up on everything except for the things he needed to survive. Even if the things he was giving up on were his sanity, his future, and his very humanity. Granted, his isolation had only lasted for several months instead of years, and the environment had not been as dire. What would have happened to him if he had not abandoned the cathedral to join Changing Star's ill-fated crusade? She looked down and added evenly. I have never felt truly connected to the rest of humanity. I was always a bit of a stranger, I guess. Out there in the dream realm, with only nightmare creatures surrounding me, that connection grew even more ethereal. Sometimes, I even felt like everything except for that desolate purgatory had been just a fleeting dream, a strange illusion that I had imagined. The dream realm, it seemed much more real. It seemed like a place where I belonged. With other monsters like me. Oh.org, she sighed, then looked at him and added. So, that's why I agreed to the offer to receive counseling. It is not because I feel fragile and on the verge of breaking apart. It's just that I'm afraid to lose what little humanity I have left. I never had a lot, to begin with. After Neff was done speaking, Sonny stared at her for some time, then shook his head. I don't think I have ever heard Neff speak so much. Placing ramen in the boiling water, he glanced at her with a frown. Well, if you put it like that, I guess a little counseling would do you good. However, I can tell you right now and without a shadow of a doubt that you are not a nightmare creature. You're a human through and through. Believe me, I would know. A pale smile appeared on Changing Star's face. Thank you for saying that. Sonny looked at her with an amused expression, and then smiled. I don't think you understand. I am not saying this because I consider you a human, or because I feel like you are a human. Or because I believe that you are a human. It's just a fact. He pointed to his eye. I have special eyes, remember. From that attribute of mine. I have seen what people look like, and what nightmare creatures look like inside. He peered into Neff's soul and grimaced, almost blinded by the brilliant radiance of 5 flaming, incandescent suns that burned inside of it. There was no sign of the vile darkness that dwelled in the souls of the corrupted abominations. Cracking an egg on the edge of the pan, he looked at her and scoffed. You don't look anything like a nightmare creature, that's all. Chapter 786 Lifeline. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Soon, 2 bowls of delicious steaming ramen were on the table in front of them. Sonny had never invited anyone to taste his ramen, but he was quite pleased with the result. His past of only eating synth paste seemed so distant that he did not even want to remember it. Both dug in and finished their portions in record time. Sonny drank the last of the fragrant broth and let out a delighted sigh. Nephi's acted more reserved, but he could feel that she was very satisfied, too. Putting the bowl away, Changing Star smiled slightly and looked at him. A hesitant expression appeared on her face. A few moments later, she suddenly said. Be that as it may, while I was lost and wandering the dream realm, slowly forgetting what it felt like to be human, there was one thing I clung to that reminded me that all my prior life had not been just a dream. Do you know what it was? Sonny thought for a bit, then shrugged. I don't know. A memory. Your sword, Dream Blade. She lingered for a few moments, then slowly shook her head. No. It was, you. Sonny froze and stared at her with surprise. Ha. Nephi smiled slightly. Your runes. Although I could not know what was happening to you, Cassie, and the others, I could still feel connected to you through the runes. I could see that you were still out there, alive, and doing incredible things. The new memories you received told me a little about what kind of enemies you fought. The speed at which your aspect legacy progressed told me how hard you were working to sharpen your battle skill. As long as I saw the runes, I knew that I had not imagined the past. And did not feel as alone. She shifted, and then added. When I was bored, I liked to imagine what exactly happened to give you a sudden influx of fragments, what the nightmare creature that gifted you a memory looked like, how you defeated it. Things like that. Oh, and I was bored often. While my journey was often full of hardship and dread, it could also be terribly monotonous sometimes. So, that was pretty much the only way I could entertain myself. Changing Star looked at him, lingered for a moment, and then said. I know it was not really something that you did consciously. Still. I wanted to say, thank you. You helped me a lot, Sunny. You made it easier for me to keep going. I won't forget that. He stared at her, suddenly uncomfortable. Then, he looked away in embarrassment and cleared his throat. Are you sure that you have not received counseling already? I mean, that doesn't sound like you. Very, enlightened. Anyway, you're welcome, I guess. Nephi smiled, and did not respond. Sunny remained silent for a bit, and then forced himself to say. Actually, I spent a lot of time staring at your runes, as well. He looked at the floor. Granted, I was not exactly going crazy from isolation like you. Well, except for a short stretch of falling into a bottomless abyss all alone, I guess. But, the point is, to be honest, I am unsatisfied with the fact that you are so far ahead of me. Every time you gained a soul fragment, it urged me to try and get two. The stronger you grew, the more I wanted to become stronger, as well. A large part of those things I gained, was because of you. I guess you, too, kept me going. In a sense. He fell silent, and then glanced at Nephi with a slightly bitter expression. Of course, no matter how hard I tried, I had never managed to catch up to you. Every time, I fell short. It did not feel nice at all. But it also forced me to try harder, I guess. She studied his face for a few moments, and then shook her head. It is much easier for me to gain soul fragments. You know that. Even though I am still ahead, I suspect that you have fought and slain much more nightmare creatures than I have. In fact, I know you did. Sunny smiled. Who cares? It's not a competition where you get rewarded for the effort. Only the result matters. In the end, a person is either strong, or they are weak. The stronger ones will always trample those who are weaker. Isn't that how the world works? Nephi looked down, then slowly shook her head. You are wrong. I think. Results matter, yes, but it's not like how you got there doesn't. Every victory you achieve teaches you a lesson. Every defeat you suffer teaches you even more. I guess it all depends on what you call strength. Sunny grimaced. Well, let me ask you a question. Can you say that I am stronger than you? Changing Star stared at him with an even expression. Several seconds passed by, but she remained silent. A dark grin appeared on Sunny's face. He sighed, and then collected the empty bowls to clean them. Effie doesn't seem to think that I am. According to her, I lack conviction. I don't even really know what conviction is and where does one find it, but even I can't honestly say that I am stronger than you. That should tell you something, considering. You know, my clear conscience. Nephi lingered for a few moments, and then suddenly said in calm tone. You are stronger than you think you are. Sunny put the bowls into the sink and turned on the water. Standing with his back to her, he stayed quiet for a while. After some time, he started to wash the dishes and said. Your counseling session is about to start. You should hurry. She looked at his back for a few moments, then silently stood up and went away. Sunny was left alone in the kitchen. He finished washing the bowls, put them on the drying rack, and wiped his hands with a towel. Then, he glanced in the direction of the guest room, shook his head, and scoffed. Ah, who cares? Apparently, I am incredible. Chapter 787 Training Session. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. A week later, two people sat across from each other on the cold floor of the underground dojo, their eyes closed. With their legs crossed and their hands resting on their laps, it seemed as though they were meditating. Of course, they weren't. While Sunny was calm and relaxed, Nephice was the opposite. There was a furious torrent of soul energy flowing through her body, making it hard for her to remain still. Invisible to anyone except for her partner, radiant streams of ethereal essence rushed through her veins like rivers of flame. Her breathing was uneven, and there were beads of sweat on her face. Sunny observed Changing Star through his shadows. After a while, he said, "You are doing much better. While crude, your control is already stable. However, there is no precision to it. A master has to be intricate in how they apply and expend their essence. That is what truly separates us from the awakened. While the soul of an ascended is more potent, the gap is not too large. It is our ability to make better use of this potential that really separates us from the rest of them." Neph was doing well. In fact, her rapid progress in learning how to control her essence was nothing short of exceptional. However, she was facing substantial obstacles in her training. Not only was Changing Star completely new to that aspect of her power, she also simply had too much soul essence. Compared to normal master, she had at least 5 times as much of it. If most ascended contained a tranquil current of essence within their bodies, Nephice contained a furious sea. Her soul essence was also different from anything Sunny had ever faced. It was much more potent, fiery, and vibrant, probably because of the fire attribute she had inherited from her mother. What it effectively meant was that Neph would have to put much more effort into learning to control her essence. However, once she did climb over that steep obstacle, the result was going to be simply terrifying. Showing her the way put Sunny's own experiences in perspective, gifting him a few new insights of his own. Just as it had been with Rain, the role of a mentor allowed him to learn a lot himself. Teaching was truly the best way to learn. Now, Sunny felt that his own essence control was far more precise and nuanced than that of most, even without the help of Soul Serpent. Of course, he had no chance to test it in actual combat yet. He was also growing more and more sour about the fact that both Blood Weave and Bone Weave were purely corporeal in nature. Although Shadow Essence was unique, it did not receive any augmentation from his attributes. In fact, the only time its strange nature played a role had been during his encounter with the vile thieving bird Spawn. Even though that single instance had saved his life, Sunny really wished for more. Maybe I am not utilizing its full potential. If there was a way to do so, however, he had no idea how. Maybe if Weaver's lineage had not devoured the shadow gods, Sunny would have been in a different situation. As it stood, though. I wonder if there is a soul weave. Nephi sighed, and opened her eyes. The turbulent flow of soul essence in her body settled, returning to a calmer cycle. She rested for a moment, and then rose to her feet. Sunny did the same, commanding the 4 shadows to wrap themselves around his body. Are you ready? She nodded, and then exploded in motion, attacking him with her fists. Empowered by the shadows, Sunny easily dodged, deflected, and blocked the torrent of devastating punches and kicks. This was the second part of their training. Nephice not only had to learn how to control soul essence, but also how to use it in battle. She had to retrain herself from the ground up to account for all the new possibilities that the ascension granted her. This was not an easy task, considering that the difference went much deeper than simple physical ability and explosive might. At their high level, combat became much more tactical. Soul essence was a precious resource that could achieve a lot, but was also easily wasted. A master had to be strategic in how they unleashed their powers. Their physical performance, aspect, and memories could all benefit from vast amounts of essence. However, they could also quickly deplete it. The same statement held true for awakened. but to a much lesser degree, since masters had much greater powers at their disposal, and thus could exert much greater volumes of soul essence. It was a constant and complicated dance that required a lot of skill, foresight, and cunning to be performed to the best result. Sunny himself still had a lot to learn. Serving as a bona fide punching bag for Nephice was not the most efficient way of learning, but it had its own merits. By dedicating himself to nothing but withstanding a constant barrage of attacks and rationing his essence in the most efficient way, Sunny was teaching himself how to prepare for long battles of attrition. At least she had mastered essence control enough to not ruin Dojo. For a while, the underground chamber was filled with nothing but the sounds of heavy breathing and flesh slapping against flesh. Both fighters were exerting themselves to the utmost degree. Sunny had it easier since he was defending, but receiving so many crushing blows in a row was still not for the weak of heart. Each of Nef's essence-empowered strikes could have punched through an armored vehicle, after all. If not for the fact that she was not using her flames to augment herself, Sunny's would have been suffering from internal bleeding by now. Having nearly indestructible bones was a big advantage, but it did not make him invincible. Their furious clash lasted until Nephice exhausted most of her essence. Determined to launch one last attack, she stepped closer. Her slender leg whipped forward, threatening to crush Sunny's ribcage. He swiftly turned and caught it in the air, then gently placed it on the ground. That's enough for today. Since this had been their routine for the entirety of the last week, neither said another word. Both fell to the floor, spent and utterly exhausted. Their breathing was hoarse, and their clothes were soaked with sweat. Damn! I need a shower. However, the idea of standing up seemed too cruel right now. Sunny turned his head to glance at Nephice and judged that she was in an even more pitiful state. So, they simply remained on the floor for a few minutes, laying side by side and trying to catch their breath. After a while, Sunny's communicator suddenly made a sound. Of course, it was not on his person. A clash of such intensity would have quickly destroyed the expensive device, so Sunny had left it on the lid of the Dreamscape pod. Now, he faced the necessity to walk all the way to the alcove to retrieve it. Instead, Sunny commanded the Happy Shadow to glide there, turn tangible, pick up the communicator and bring it back. The fool was utterly delighted to oblige, anyway. As the shadow gingerly crossed the underground dojo and presented the communicator to Sunny, he glanced at the screen, and then sighed. Time to go, Nef. Cassie is on her way. Chapter 788 Cordial Invitation. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sunny took a quick shower and went downstairs. By the time he came down, Nephice was just exiting the guest room. She changed from the gym shorts and a tank top that she had been wearing for their practice session and put on some of the clothes they had ordered for her a few days back. Her silver hair was wet, glistening in the rays of sunshine that poured through the windows. Without having to say anything, Sunny went to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and took out a can of grounded coffee. Then, he stretched his arm back. By then, Nephice had already filled a pot with water and placed it into his hand. Soon, the pleasant aroma spread through the house. By the time the coffee was ready, a PTV was in the process of parking nearby. Sunny dumped 2 spoons of sugar into his cup, left the one intended for Nef without any, and added cream to the third. Changing Star, meanwhile, was opening the door for Cassie. Soon, all three were seated around the table, enjoying their respective beverages. After a while, Sunny glanced at the blind girl and asked, "Well, what's the news?" She lingered for a bit, then pushed her cup away and produced 2 flat, white squares. Sunny stared at them for a bit, confused. Then, he blinked a couple of times. "Is that an envelope?" Indeed, that was what the white squares were. They seemed to be made out of paper, and each had a round piece of red wax attached to it. Sunny had only seen an actual paper envelope used in period dramas, so he was justifiably surprised to encounter one in real life. Taking one of the envelopes, he curiously studied it from different sides. How quaint! There was an image of a sword piercing an anvil etched into the red wax, so at least he did not have to wonder where the strange things had come from. Legacies. Amused, he furtively glanced at Nephis to learn what one was supposed to do with a paper envelope, and then repeated her actions. Soon, a different piece of paper appeared in his hands. Master Sunless, you are cordially invited. What? What is this? Even more confused than before, he turned to Cassie and raised an eyebrow. She was supposed to bring them an update on the situation with the government and Clan Valor, not some weird messages. The blind girl smiled slightly. Basically, this is a gesture of goodwill. She paused for a moment, and then added in a bright tone. It is an invitation. Clan Valor is holding an annual ball in about a month. We are all invited to attend, which is usually considered a great honor. Not every master receives the privilege to brush sides with the most powerful representatives of the great clans and actual saints. Sunny blinked a couple of times. Dot is holding balls, some weird legacy ceremony. Wait, what kinds of ball are we talking about? Something like a football. Why do people hold it annually, and more importantly, why do we have to attend this ball-holding ritual? Nephis silently covered her face with a hand and said, a hint of exasperation finding its way into her voice. Sunny, a ball is a social gathering, usually accompanied by a dance. It is not a literal ball. He stared at her for a moment, then glanced at the piece of paper in his hand and coughed. Oh, that makes more sense, I guess. Cassie listened to them speak with a strange expression, then tilted her head a little and said. Of course, in our case, this invitation holds special meaning. It is a sign that Clan Valor is willing to be patient and wait for Nephis to recover. It is also the indication that the final negotiation is going to take place during the ball, 1 month from now. This gives us time to prepare. This was a good piece of news, all things considered. Basically, it meant that now that the initial week was over, Changing Star had more time to get ready to face the representatives of Clan Valor. It also meant that the Great Clan was not going to do anything before that, giving her freedom to recuperate in peace. It was more or less an armistice. A bright smile appeared on Cassie's delicate face. But there is more. To show their sincerity, Clan Valor released the Fire Keepers they were holding hostage. Both are already back, and resting in the Immortal Flame Manor. This means that they are serious about building a good relationship with us, I think. Sunny let out a sigh. He was not really attached to the Fire Keepers. Still, they had gone through the civil war in the Bright Castle and the siege of the Crimson Spire together. The fools also treated him as one of their own, for some reason. He had felt a bit guilty knowing that some of them were suffering because of the terrible mess in the Night Temple. Effie, Kai, and Aiko were going very happy to hear the news, too. However, it was not like Clan Valor to let go of leverage. Sunny glanced at Cassie and frowned. What are they scheming? The blind girl hesitated for a few moments, then shrugged. I am not entirely sure. However, I do have a suspicion. This sudden change must indicate that something important happened to shift the balance of power even more in favor of Clan Song. That is why Valor is willing to make concessions to ensure that Immortal Flame becomes their ally. Sunny suddenly felt a strong sense of unease. What could have happened to change the power dynamic between the two great clans so much? He took a sip of his coffee, and then asked. Well, so what now? Cassie smiled. Now, we are free to do anything we want for a month. The government is going to insist that Nephis makes at least one public appearance, but they won't be too forceful in their demands. So, we can do whatever. She turned to Changing Star and said, her voice full of warmth. Neph, how do you feel about finally coming home? We can go to the manor right now. If you're ready. Chapter 789 Only forward. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Nephis looked in the window and remained silent for a while. Her face was distant and still. After a while, she lightly shook her head. No, not yet. Cassie seemed to be surprised by that answer. No. But, why? Changing Star sighed. The Fire Keepers. That is what people call the awakened who follow you, right? They all look up to me, do they not? The blind girl silently nodded. Of course. They have been waiting for your return ever since escaping the Forgotten Shore. Even though the Dreamer Army was an alliance of convenience, the bonds that were forged between its members are real. Their bond to you is real, too. Sunny sipped his coffee with a strange expression. Neff, meanwhile, lingered for a moment, and then said. But they want more than just to welcome me back. They expect me to lead them, like I did on the Forgotten Shore. Am I correct? Cassie nodded once again. Neff looked away. How can I lead them when I don't know where I am going? I need more time to figure things out before I face them. The blind girl remained silent for a while, then sighed. I understand. I think. Sunny, meanwhile, did not understand. Sure, on the surface, what Nephis said made perfect sense. She was not sure of what she was going to do, so she could not offer the remnants of the Dreamer Army guidance. She could not become their general again until she decided on the direction her soldiers had to follow. However, Sunny harbored doubts about the sincerity of this indecision. Nephis had never been one to allow her hesitation to slow her down. More than that, she had spent 2 whole years alone in the dream realm. If he knew anything about her, he knew that she must have dedicated a considerable amount of that time to obsessively making plans of how to destroy her enemies once she returned. Of course, there was a lot of new information that became available to Neff after she came back. That had to change her approach a little, but should not have affected the core of it. So why was she hesitating? What was she struggling with? Sunny did not know, and was not sure that he wanted to know, yet. In any case, he was going to learn sooner or later. There was something else that bothered him, though. He glanced at Nephis and Cassie and then said, his voice grumpy. Aren't you two forgetting something? This is still my home. We only agreed that Nephis would stay here for a week. Shouldn't you at least ask me before deciding to leave her here for a while longer? He was not going to let Changing Star pull off an Effie that easily. Neff turned and looked at him with an unreadable expression. After a few moments of silence, she asked. Sunny, do you mind if I stay for a couple more weeks? He coughed, and then glanced away in embarrassment. Of course. Sure, no problem. Glad to have you, and all that. See, was that so hard? Cassie remained for a bit longer to get Nephis up to speed about the state of the Fire Keepers and the renovations they were making to the Immortal Flame Manor, and then left. Running a prominent awakened organization was not an easy task, so she had a lot on her plate. Sunny and Neff were left alone again. He hesitated for a few moments, and then asked. Do you really not want to go home? I mean, I never really had one, more or less, before buying this house. But if I did, I imagine I would have missed it a lot. Nephis glanced at him, then slowly shook her head. That place is not really my home. We were moving a lot while I was growing up. Sometimes because our financial situation changed, sometimes due to security issues. That manor is just the last in a long series of temporary shelters. She remained silent for a few moments, then added. I guess it were the people who surrounded me that created the feeling of home. But they are all gone now, one way or the other. So, there's nothing for me to return to. Sunny sighed, remembering the conversation he once had with Noctis. I don't really understand what the Immortal Flame Clan is, to be honest. And who those people were. You once said that you were raised by your grandmother. Changing Star nodded. The immortal flame is just me, now. At its height, it was one of the most influential legacy clans. You could have called it a great clan, even, although that distinction was not established yet back then. Apart from the immediate family, the clan also encompassed hundreds of other people. Professionals to manage our properties, craftsmen, mundane soldiers, awakened retainers, their dependents. The legacy clan is more than just a few powerful warriors. It is a large, self-sufficient institution. A tribe, even. She grew silent, and then said. Of course, our fortunes turned after Immortal Flame himself died, and my mother became hollow. Then my father was gone, too. Only my grandmother remained to take care of me. She was not an awakened, however, don't think that she was weak because of it. On the contrary, although my grandmother was a mundane human, she was also the strongest person I've ever known. Nephis looked away, a hint of emotion appearing on her face. She was a member of the first generation. She was born during the darkest times of humanity, survived the bloody descent of the spell and the final convulsions of the old world order, then participated in the establishment of the new one. She was strong. She was also wise, and kind. I couldn't wish for a better guardian. She looked down. However, she was not enough to keep the Immortal Flame clan from falling, especially not when we found ourselves in the crosshairs of my father's former companions. Slowly but surely, we lost our assets and our standing. Some of the people in our employ left of their own free will, others were forced to abandon us because of adversity. Many of those who remained died trying to protect me. The most loyal ones still persisted, there were several awakened among them, and even a master. My mentor. Nephi sighed. But in the end, he was gone, too. By the time I turned 16, all that remained were a few mundane servants who had been with us for so long that they had nowhere else to go. After my grandmother passed away and I felt the call of the nightmare spell, I paid them a generous stipend from what little funds the clan had left, and let them go. You know the rest. Changing Star remained silent for a while, and then added. That I remember walking through the manor before leaving it to comply with the third directive and surrender myself to the police. It was so strange, seeing it completely empty. My grandmother was gone. My mother was in the care facility. The servants had left. It was just me, alone. She looked away. Suddenly, a pale smile appeared on her face. Nothing held me back. So, I wasn't sad to leave at all. There was only one direction left for me, forward. Sunny looked at her silently, a somber expression hidden in the depths of his eyes. Only forward. That was true for the both of them, still. However, was it worth it to not be held back by anything, if in return you had nothing to hold dear? Turning away, he sighed. Life was not that simple anymore. Chapter 790 Outing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Despite the fact that Nephis had decided to stay with Sunny for a couple more weeks, or rather, that he had allowed her stay, their routine somewhat changed. Because of the armistice with Clan Valor, she did not have to stay inside all the time anymore. So, while the two of them still continued having exhausting practice sessions every day, the intensity of the training diminished. On the first day after receiving the invitation to the ball, Nephis had left to visit her mother. Soon after that, she made a strange request. The counselor assigned to Neph by the government had suggested that she should not isolate herself from mundane humans and, instead, seek out opportunities to participate in collective activities people usually enjoyed. So, she asked Sunny to help her figure out what it was that people did with their free time. Sunny was glad to help. The problem was, he had no idea himself. His life experience was richer than hers, but the knowledge of how people lived their lives in the outskirts did not exactly apply to their situation. After becoming a citizen and moving to a better part of the city, Sunny had spent all his time doing more productive things than relaxing. Who had time to relax? There were so many things he needed to achieve. As the result, they had to turn to other members of the cohort for advice. When they did, Effie enthusiastically volunteered to arrange an outing. Although Sunny had a bad premonition about her proposal, he found no polite reason to refuse the giddy huntress. So, a few days later, he found himself doing something that he had never thought he would ever do. Sunny was getting ready to go to a dance club. What am I even doing? This is so stupid. Standing in front of the mirror, he somberly looked at the pale young man that stared back at him. The young man was dressed in stylishly understated clothes that mixed black with different shades of dark gray. He was undeniably attractive, although not exactly masculine in appearance. The attractive young man, of course, was him. Or his reflection, rather. Sunny studied it and frowned. Whatever, it's just a nightclub. I have fought saints and survived. I have conquered the Red Colosseum. I have faced a demon. How scary can a bunch of drunk mundanes be? Shaking his head, he let out a heavy sigh and went down to the living room. As he sat and waited with a dark expression on his face, an expensive PTV arrived and parked near the house. At that moment, Effie and Neff emerged from one of the smaller bedrooms on the second floor and started descending the stairs. Finally. What took you so? He turned and froze, unable to finish his thought. Standing on the polished steps, Neff looked different. Although she was famous across the world, most people only knew her by name. Very few had actually seen the renowned changing star of the Immortal Flame clan, mostly because she had yet to appear in public after her return from the Dream Realm. However, it was still prudent to mask some of her more recognizable features to avoid being mobbed by an excited crowd. For that reason, Sunny had lent her the autumn leaf. Using the cosmetic memory, Nephice changed the color of her distinct silver hair. Now, her hair was black and lustrous, falling to the middle of her back like a waterfall of finest silk. Contrasted against it, her calm gray eyes seemed even more striking. Her ivory skin seemed to glow despite the fact that she was not channeling the radiant white flames. What was more, Effie had been the one who chose and bought the clothes for the two of them to wear today. As the result, Nephice was wearing a vibrant red dress that barely reached the middle of her thigh, and left her shoulders bare. She looked stunning. Sunny gulped, then forced himself to look away. A few moments later, he finally was able to say something. Never thought I'd see you in a dress. One day. Nephice glanced at herself, then shrugged with indifference. I like it. The style does not diminish my range of motion. I can move freely if something happens. Sunny hesitated and then glanced at Effie, who was wearing less flashy clothes, with suspicion. How come you get to wear pants? Effie grinned. Why else? That's because I'm not a princess, doofus. She giggled, and then did a spin. What, don't you think that my ensemble is flattering? It was. Maybe even too much so. Not knowing where to put his eyes, Sunny gritted his teeth and forced himself to stare at the wall. This is going to be a long night. He cleared his throat, and then said. Yeah. You look nice, too. Anyway, we should go. Our ride is already here. Effie giggled again, patted him on the shoulder, and headed for the door. Sunny and Nephice followed. Soon, they entered the PTV and greeted the others. After seeing Kai, Sunny's mood improved a bit. At least the former idol seemed to be in his element. Cassie, on the other hand, seemed uneasy. Well, no wonder. A club filled with thundering music was not the best environment for a beautiful, blind girl to be in. Of course, anyone who got the wrong idea was bound to learn that they made a giant mistake by approaching her with ill intent. Kai smiled at him from the driver's seat. Sunny, you look great. Then, he turned to Nephice and Effie and smiled even wider, almost blinding them with his dazzling grin. But not as great as the ladies do, of course. Sonny rolled his eyes. Just drive, all right. Let's get this finished with as soon as possible. Kai winked at him, then looked at the road and sent the PTV forward. Relax, Sonny. It's just a dance club. What's the worst that could happen? Sonny and the gloomy shadow simultaneously shuddered. Are you kidding me? Did you have to say that out loud?